is the booking pace that is on Babar right now. And the thing I want to actually tie down to is this idea of accountability. So let's go ahead and take a look at who or what has happened in the past week. Let's go to, oh, there she is. There is Lilith. Welcome in, Lilith. All right, let's take a look at Babar. Looking at the graph, Liana, what have you noticed about the graph since the past week?
Wait. Okay, so in the past week, I see the booking pace for last minute is getting higher.
Right. Okay. All right. Very good.
And it actually is very good. Get like from 1, 4, and then to yeah. If we can keep on this pace, and then if I see the calendar, actually tomorrow we have 2 empty rooms.
Okay.
So hopefully, all these new guests that I just make the chain of how the cleanliness standards should be. Hopefully, the start of the cleanliness getting higher immediately because we get a booking.
Okay.
For this area. So yeah, hopefully they will catch up the momentum.
Okay.
The owner have very good support about us,
Okay.
and yeah, we have very good relationship with him.
Okay.
So what I did is that sometimes when I need something, he just give it to me, and then if so I know that he didn't have much time to teach the staff, and then they didn't know even like to teach them, and then I just whatever they need, then just I bought it for them, and then I and teach them how to clean it. It's really appreciated,
Okay.
and hopefully this I went today. Actually, the place is much better, like
Really?
way cleaner.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Here's what we're gonna do, Vidi. What have you noticed about the performance of this particular property, Vidi?
Ya bersih banget tadi ya.
For Baba, right?
Yeah.
For Baba, the past week it looks the pace looks pretty healthy. Although we need to consider that there are 8 listings, I think, in Baba property, right?
Yes, sir. There's, I think, far more than 8 even. There's
Yeah.
quite a lot. Quite a lot. Now.
Baba, I think there's Baba 1 until Baba 8, according to Tokit. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the date.
A couple listings. Okay. Thank you very much for asking.
There are 8 listings. Therefore, if you want to, how much do we have there? I think we have around 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 14 bookings in the past week, right? So 14 divided by, let's say 14 divided by 8 listings is almost 2, but it's still below 2.
Right.
Of our target of 2 listings per 2 bookings per listings per week.
Okay. Very good, Vidi. Lilith, I have a question. Do you manage Babar's revenue management? Lilith, you're muted right now, so you'll have to press the M button.
Yeah, you muted.
Yeah, I managed the Babar start from February 13. Actually, I also record for the Babar evaluation from the booking days, as Fidi says just now. We have like 8 rooms. I measure it from the room availability. So if the if the SLA is minimum 2 rooms and minimum 2 night bookings in 1 room, and then we achieve like 93% of the SLA. So it's almost achieved in this week.
Okay, excellent, very good. So let me just affirm that with you. Did you say you started on February 13th, Lilith?
Yeah, I started from February 13.
Okay, all right. Let's go with my analysis here. Whatever is happening is good, right? So what I've seen is sometime around February 9th, things started really doing really well, abnormally well. And if you take a look at, let's say, Babar versus the company, it's actually doing better than the company. The company itself, the booking pace is actually slowing down from the previous week. But for Babar, it's actually accelerating, which is actually really exciting. I just opened one particular listing, and I agreed with Wayana's analysis on that. The overall hospitality score is quite low. We aim for a 4.5 in order to steady up, but it's currently around a 4.1. So
And also, if you can click on that, and then you can click the star or the review.
it's mostly
So you can see the cleanliness. So that's why I'm investing on the cleanliness.
okay,
Hmm.
very
So
good.
hopefully that will be best up. But every time I go here, I will do that continuously until it's really they get it. Until I don't have to check frequently. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think this is very good. Now, what I am hypothesizing is happening right now is that we're getting some good revenue management, perhaps through the tactics that Lewis is putting in place right now to accelerate bookings on Babar. Now, that is only sustainable if we actually consistently get good reviews. And absolutely correct. This is actually how revenue management needs to work with community in order to get a sustainable booking pace and sustainable revenue growth. That there are things that, let's say, community can fix. And so far from what YN is telling us, it seems like there's some good news to say about Babar in terms of owner cooperation and owner understanding about fixing the most urgent issue. So this is actually quite good. And let's continue watching what happens to Babar over time because I think
And and also I'm working with content. So since Rizal here, it was outside of Rizal schedule, and I asked him to take a night photo so that it's more. It's we so boost like in every
okay, I think Diana dropped out there. I'm predicting what she said was boost on every direction, which is good. Okay, fantastic. Let's keep on taking a look and zoom out now across and look at Squad 4's overall activity. So if we zoom out and we see hey, welcome back, babe. Let's take a look at how Squad 4 is doing. Now, before we go into Squad 4, let's pay attention to what, let's say, the booking pace is doing for the company. So, in terms of how it's doing for the company, let's just take a look at a smaller time frame instead of the past 30 days. We're going to take a look at the past 2 weeks. So, in the past 2 weeks, we could see that on the median for the previous week of early February, from February 4th to February 11th, we're somewhere around 90 bookings a day, right? So I'm looking at 95, 91, 100. The lowest that we had was 84, so above 84 and below 109. This current week, we are doing a bit worse. We're at a high of 96 and the low is 70, so significantly changed. So we're seeing, let's say, a downward trend on booking pace on the overall company. Now, in order for us to measure, let's say, Lilith's activity, but also Vidi's activity on Square, no, Ben, you gotta mute your mic. Okay. If what we see is this, if
I need to go. I need to go. I need to go. I
bye,
really need to go.
bye. Okay,
See you. Yeah.
this would be a good indicator of understanding achievement. If what Squad 4 is doing is better in terms of booking pace and weekly sales in the company, that means in overall activity, it is a lift mechanism. If it's doing worse, then we know it's kind of pulling it down. So let's go ahead and take a look and compare the week to week comparison. So let's take a look at Squad 4. And, ooh, okay, all right, interesting. Let's go over to Vidi. Vidi, what do you think in terms of the second week to the first week to second week performance on Squad 4? Is there a noticeable gain or improvement, or is it about the same?
Okay, right. So from what I see here, from the first week of February to the second week, 15 to what's that? 21? Is it or are you referring to?
We're looking at, let's say, the first week, so
Oh,
February 3rd until the 10th, and then the second
yeah,
is February 10th until right now.
right. The second week seemed to be more stable in the middle,
Hmm.
while the first week uh, tends to be parabolic with the time.
Yes. Okay. Interesting. Right, right, right. Oh, let's go to Lilith. Lilith, do you see any patterns here? Lilith, you're muted.
Um, Actually, the second week started from 9 to I think to 16,
Okay.
and then the rest is the first week. The pattern here is actually first thing that I observe is uh the lowest is larger than the lowest booking base is larger than the previous week, and then the
Yes.
pattern here is like um it's like not really normal distribution, but they has a peak.
Okay.
Normal distribution. It's most likely normal distribution, but it's peak. I
Okay.
don't really.
This is how I'm seeing it, guys. Right. So this is what I see as 1 week of data, and then this is also what I see as 1 week of data. Do you see that it follows a typical pattern? So there's a peak, and then it drops, and there's kind of like a midweek rise, and then it sort of drops again, like what Vidi was saying. So it's oddly almost parabolic, right? So let's go ahead and ask ourselves this question: is there anything special between the 11th and the 4th?
Word.
Okay, let's go to Lilith. What sort of pattern would you be able to devise from looking at, let's say, the 11th and the 4th?
11 and 4th.
Right.
Uh, I think it's in the second day of the week.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah,
Yeah, right?
it's
Which is a little bit.
Tuesday.
I cheated because I figured out tomorrow's the 18th, and then 18 is 7 away from 11, and 14 away from 4. So I kind of just did the math in my head. So it's a Tuesday. Now, okay, what would be, let's say, the next, if you're curious, what would be your next question?
mm, will this Thursday? I mean, this second day of the third week or uh Thursday will be the same pattern.
Yeah.
It's like
So my question is exactly the same. Is Tuesday the peak day every day? So let's go back
yeah.
and take a look, right? Let's go back, let's say 35 days and see if we see a consistent pattern on Tuesdays. So this is 7 days away. And then 7 days away from February 4th is, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, no, right? Because then the next Tuesday backwards after February 4th is let's see. Oh, I cannot. I need to change. Or actually, I'll give this burden to Vidi. Vidi, what is the Tuesday after before February 4th?
Mm,
Um,
20, sorry, 28.
28
28,
28 of
January.
January, right?
28 of January. You sure? Oh, 28 of January. Yes. Okay. All right. So let's look
Yeah.
at 28 of January, and it is not actually. So the 28th of January is this stack here, which is not the local maximum, but the 27th is a local maximum, right? And then let's jump back a week after that, which is the 20th, and then it's not true again. The 20th is a local minimum again, but Monday is a local maximum. Okay, so we do kind of have a pattern here. Between Mondays and Tuesdays, there is a peak for every week, right? This is a Monday on the
Mhm.
19th, and the Tuesday is there. And then the next time it's the 20th and the 15th. And the next time is the 23rd, or February 4th and the 16th. And okay, all right, so maybe not as tight as we thought, but there's definitely an interesting sort of peak behavior sometime in the the first and second day of the week. All right, let's video. Let's analyze this a little bit more. Would you, let's say you're evaluating Lilith's work, would you think that she's been successful in managing the Squad 4 profiles or not successful managing the Squad 4 profiles?
Um, just from the data from these past 2 weeks, since she started,
Yeah.
there has been an improvement because I'm coincidentally I'm also given 4 properties to manage for RM, so I'm doing patrol Oh, I'm also doing payroll for properties.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and I noticed that the last week, actually, before we had the meeting, the occupancy is pretty low, and it's reflected from the data. I think there's decline, but
Mhm.
then I think she's doing well in terms of doing suggestion and giving suggestions to others
Okay.
regarding what for. But sir, actually, I have a question regarding the booking
Yes,
pace.
sir. Okay. What is your
Um,
question, Vinny?
Right. So when we were observing, I'm doing RM paid petrol last night, right?
Mhm.
And then something occurred to me when we look at the booking pace. Why are we observing? Let's say, I'm observing the booking pace of the peak and the trough of a particular graph, right? And we observe that, for example, as you said, in a Tuesday, possibly there is a trough or there's local minima on the Tuesday, right?
Mhm.
But how is there a pattern or an like how can you recognize a pattern where Tuesday has to be the lowest one? Because logic is, I don't know, from my perspective, um, the booking pace reflected in the data here reflects the day where someone books the property, not the day where they check in into the property.
Ah, correct. Yes, very much so. Yes, it does reflect the right. So then you would have to look at. Oh, okay, right. Good.
Yeah,
Continue your question, please.
yeah. Because for example, what I did yesterday was I checked the calendar instead. Because for example, I'm doing experiment, right? For example, I changed the price for Glosari property for this week, for example. After 1 week, I will not check the booking page because the booking page might not check in for the part of the like might not check into the dates where I set the dates lower than the usual dates, right?
Yes, sir.
So there is no effect. Therefore, I check on the occupancy rates, like the difference between the occupancy rate. I think it's more reflective towards the like my experiment result. But because
Right.
like, I was observing like when we look at the booking page, we always see just like we only observe like, oh, the past 7 days there is a booking pace of this much, but actually it's only the booking date, right?
Yes.
Like anyone can book, like I can book now, but when I check in, I might choose a particular date, or I don't know if there is a trend where people actually just take their time and book on a Sunday, for example.
Okay, you're right about that. So that's actually a very wise observation, Vinny. So the actual booking pace indicates right the day that they actually book rather than the day that they'll actually check in. So you do have some gap between, let's say, occupancy and booking pace, and that gap is the booking window, right? So you have a few number of days that is going to happen before the time of booking and the time of check-in. Generally, let's take a look to improve our understanding of the intuition on Squad 4, see what type of booking windows we're working with. And then the next thing I'd like to talk about is that thing that we talked about last, Lilith, before we both had the weekend, which is the fill rate multiplied against the occupancy, which is an interesting new system. So let's take a look and understand what the distribution is on, let's say, squad 4. If I can, I cannot do it. Damn it! I don't have a filter. So, Vinny, to answer your question, yes, I do think that using the occupancy is one of the ways to get actually a more fine tuning to understanding where the revenue risk is the most urgent. Because you're correct, there is some lag between booking pace and actual occupancy. But the actual thing that we discovered was actually pretty interesting. So Lilith and I were speaking about this, and we discovered a new thing, and this is what we think might interest you. So let's open it up. Lilith, do you remember where we put that finding? I think it was on your OKR, right?
Yeah, it's in my OKR in the last column.
Okay.
I move it to the March OKR.
Ah,
Sorry.
okay, great stuff, great stuff. Oh yeah, Lewis, just as a point of reminder, move all the newer information to the top. That makes it so that each time we scroll, we don't have to scroll
Oh,
to the bottom. Yeah, it's like Twitter or whatever. The newest is should be on the top. But okay,
okay.
Diddy, you're onto something here, and what I'd like to show you is a discovery that we made, and I think this will simplify the job of RM quite considerably. And this is what the discovery is. So, let's see. This is an idea about creating a better visualization to identify revenue risk. So, let's say, for example, currently, right? This is a Google Analytics graph of our website, but Imagine that this was actually an occupancy graph. So imagine we had a heat map showing what the occupancy looked like across the entire Bukit Vista inventory. So dark colors would indicate high occupancy, light colors would indicate low occupancy, right? And if you have that alone, just that by itself, you would have actually some good information about what dates need to be discounted and what dates are okay, right? Oh shit, the rain's coming down, so I'm gonna have to kind of start screaming now. So excuse me if I raise my voice. All right, but that wouldn't tell you the whole picture, Vidi, because you wouldn't be able to see a certain condition. You wouldn't be able to know what has high occupancy and has, let's say, a slow fill rate, what has low occupancy but a high fill rate. So meaning this, meaning let's say for example you had a date that had low occupancy, but it was getting filled really quickly. It was like selling at like 15 room nights a day. It wouldn't be then necessary to actually then attend to that date because that date would not actually be urgent to fill because that date is getting filled really quickly. What would be urgent is something that had a cross product. So let's say, for example, we had, instead of looking at the calendars that we see now, we had essentially a unit cell. The unit cell, hey, Ben, you gotta turn that off. You gotta cut out your mic. Hey, cut off your mic. Okay, you got to. All right. So, Vidi, imagine we have this. Imagine a cell where we had a shade for each date, and the shade is corresponding to the occupancy, and then there's a little gradient on it that corresponds to how quickly that date is being filled. So essentially, not a booking pace anymore, but how many room nights for that particular night are being sold. So let's say, for example, March 1st. March 1st today at Bukit Vista might have a 50% occupancy, and it might be being filled at, like on a weekly rate of 50 room nights a week, right? So we know something about the occupancy and we know something about how quickly it's being filled. So then that gives us a actual decision. It gives us actually an ability to make a decision on what nights on our calendar are less likely to be filled and what nights are less. So this is an example from a surf chart, right? So this is, let's say, the end result of what we could be looking at. So on a surf chart, you get a few different coordinates. You get one, the little arrows are indications of wind, and the colors of each, like the ocean is the colors of, I think, waves or swells. So pretend this isn't, pretend this means something else, right? Pretend instead of actually like red corresponding to ocean swells, pretend that red corresponds to low occupancy nights. And then pretend that the gradient of this represents actually how quickly that date is being sold. So then if you look at this, you can see, oh, okay, for example, this night is really empty and the sell rate is really low. It's below the standard. So nights like this are the nights that we need to focus on as revenue managers to fix first. That indicates there's very low occupancy and there's not a lot of people who are currently purchasing it. So those would need a price adjustment. But then you could take a look at, let's say, colors like maybe like this, right? Blue, let's say, indicates higher occupancy, and then the up arrow indicates that it's being selling like very quickly. That would indicate a condition where you do not need to make any price changes. It's doing really well. Okay, so this was the discussion I had with Lilith about a new type of visualization. And Bayu told me that actually this was pretty easy to actually do. But what is actually even easier is this. So instead of actually having to do it automatically, let's go to Vidi. Is there a way that we can make this even more simple and even more automated?
On the top of my head, not I couldn't think of an idea yet actually, but a simpler method compared to that. I don't know, but the closest thing I've actually seen was a library called Optical Flow, but it applies to video data. But I
Okay.
think you can, yeah, it's called Optical Flow, but
Uh,
I think it is, yeah, it's possible.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Lilith. Lilith, do you have any ideas on how we can simplify this idea even more and make it even easier. Oh, Lilith, you're muted.
Sorry, sir. So, based on the experiment I'm doing for the six property in squad four, at first I thought that I have to know is the booking pace, and the second is the occupancy. Yeah, the occupancy means for the calendar. So, uh, the simplest way that I can detect which property or which area that I should taking care of is the booking pace and the occupancy. So the visualization is like first one is for the booking pace, and the second is for the what is that? Sorry, for the ticket calendar. So
Okay.
that's two is my basic thing that I should observe first.
Okay, let's
Maybe
go
that.
ahead and take a look at that. Let's go through a few lean agile iterations and then see how we can improve it. Right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through an evolution with both of you, and then we're going to take a look at how we can evolve a method. So currently, let's say Lilith's method is this, right? So she looks at the booking pace and looks at the occupancy on Toki, and then she makes a decision based on that. For this is what, let's say, the prioritization method, right? This is how we prioritize which particular properties we want to attend to, and this is related to what Vidi had actually discussed before about how booking pace and the actual dates that get occupied are slightly different, right? Okay, so let's talk about the pros on that. What are some of the pros on that? The pros on that are that first, it's measurable. It's very easy to measure because we already have it on Tableau, right? But what are some of the cons to this? What are some of the negatives to this particular method? Vidi, you had your idea on some of the negatives. What was it?
Yeah. Yesterday when I tried it, it's pretty slow because you have to navigate back and forth because in one property there are several listings, so you go back and forth between the calendar and
Okay.
the tableau.
Okay, so there's this navigation problem. Vidi, if you split your screen, that could actually help, right? Navigating. Here, I'll show you. What happens if you did this? If you split your Tableau screen like this, and then you did one screen for Toki like this, and oh wait, you don't have a Mac. Okay, you can split screens. I think on Windows.
I can, but I tried it yesterday, but it's not because the size will.
Oh, so Vidi needs a bigger monitor. Okay, we'll get you an extra long monitor so that you can fit both sides on the thing. Okay, good point. That is a good point that we need to tab forward and backwards so the navigation can be cumbersome, right? But there's also another negative that's actually very important too. Let me put it this way. Booking pace is not great because booking pace doesn't reflect actual occupancy. Your booking pace might look good, but your occupancy actually could be terrible because the booking pace can be addressing months outside of the area that you need occupancy the most urgently. So you might need occupancy this week, but your booking pace is for something else. So using booking pace is not like the most ideal way to actually understand and get, like, let's say, the most finite and control over your revenue management. There is another concept that's a little bit better, and I'll introduce that to you. It's the fill rate. Let's go over to Vidi. Vidi, what do you think fill rate means?
Um, I think it has something to do with the occupancy and also the rate.
Okay, let's give it a function name since we're all math competent, right? The function of a fill rate on a day is the number of room nights. Wait, it's the number of room nights sold on that day.
They.
Does that make sense? So if we're talking about the fill rate for March 1st, it's how many room nights on March 1st we're selling every day, every week, whatever, right? So per time. So if you call, let's say, what's the weekly fill rate for March 1st? It can be, I don't know, it can be like maybe 50 room nights per week, right? So that means on March 1st, we're filling that particular day every week at 50 room nights or at 5 days. So essentially, it's like a booking pace for a specific calendar day. Yes, over to Vidi.
I think that's
Oh, Vidi, you're muted again.
yesterday I did projection, right? What we call it, revenue management platform, right? That's actually what I did.
Oh, you did?
So if I'm so I measured for each of the properties. Like for example, I cannot share my screen, right?
You can?
Uh,
Sure, go
can I?
for it. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Can I?
Go ahead.
Yesterday, I took note of this. How do you? Oh, I took note of this. For example, uh, I measured the 5 bookings in the past 7 days, but then one bookings per week. So I counted the occupancy and the number of bookings per week.
Oh, okay. All right, got
But
it.
the difference is I also counted per listing because, for example, if you have 16 listings in one property, it's not fair if you have a high fill rate, but you don't consider also the listings.
Yes. Okay, good. You need to
So
be
that's
able
what
to
I
get
did.
all your listings to work in order to get the highest fill rate.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why. That's why I would the difference is I also divided by the number of occupancy and booking rate with also the listing.
Okay, got it. All right, go over to Lilith. Lilith for questions.
Uh, Actually, I think about the listing. Each property has some rooms, and then, for example, maybe there are 4 rooms, but the rooms has like 5 listing. But when the listing is 5, the other one is, for example, for 3 bedrooms. But the bedroom is but the rooms that they use as the listing is 3 of those 4 rooms. So if we measure it by listing, it's like I don't know. Is it automatically filled when people book it for rooms and then
Ah,
uh, yeah? Do you understand what I mean,
yeah, I
sir?
understand. If you have a
So
multiple unit
I
listing, then
think yeah.
okay,
I think if we measure it, for example, if we divide it by rooms, it more makes sense rather than dividing it by listing.
okay. All right. So that's actually another weakness to using booking pace because when you get, let's say, a booking on a multiple unit listing, like you have a like one listing, but it actually represents 4 units, then it's not the same as a booking on a single unit, right? Because you're obviously selling more at an accelerated rate. And it's something that we do too fairly frequently. So booking pace has this that has it's not a fine tool. It's essentially a tool that is good because it's easy to measure, but it lacks the finesse that we're looking for. It lacks the finesse of how much actually are we selling. Booking pace of 4 on a listing that's selling 4 units is equivalent to 16 on a 1 unit listing, right? So we have to be able to take that into account as well. And so that makes actually us to this part. The fill rate is actually the point I'm trying to get to is the actual figure we really need to think about is think about each date as a container, right? It's exactly the same idea that we have for the revenue projection for our company. We try to understand how big is that container overall for, let's say, February. We try to then see how filled is that container right now, right? So at the beginning of February, I think we had something around, what was it, like, I forgot, 173,000 or something like that. And then we asked ourselves, how much can we fill it using a weekly sales as a figure of identifying that? Now, if we have that, then we can actually understand what is essentially the capacity we're targeting, how much of it has been filled, and how quickly that's been filled, right? So if we start, let's say, using the fill rate as a measurement of success for occupancy, then we'll have a much more clear idea of how to control occupancy and therefore, Vidi, how to actually manage revenue better. So I do agree with you that looking at occupancy is a much more fine way of controlling revenue. But currently, we need to think of occupancy as dynamic. So occupancy can't just be what is the occupancy today. It's what is the occupancy plus what's the trajectory of the occupancy. I think in calculus, this is like a first gradient, right? So it's not just like where it is, but where also the curve is going. So if we have both dimensions, where it is and where it's going, then we can actually determine what the what we should do about that, right? What we need to do about that particular date. So here's the hard part about this. This is not a figure yet, so we have to create this metric on Tableau. If we don't have a figure yet, then we have to actually create a way to filter out that particular that value. But I just had another idea. Wow, this is great. Okay, so we're talking about fill rate in terms of occupancy, but I have another idea about fill rate, and let's see if we can all be inspired at the same time. It's even more effective than looking at the fill rate for occupancy. What's the other kind of fill rate we can ask ourselves and determine in order to actually, let's say, push the revenue forward? There's another type of fill rate.
Is that revenue?
Yes! Wow! Bingo! Very good. It's the revenue fill rate. And the reason why is, okay, why would the revenue fill rate be superior to the occupancy fill rate? Willis.
Because it is related to the price. I mean, for example, the occupancy may be high, but it might indicate that we set a low price or it's too low, and yeah,
Correct.
that's my point.
If we want to, we're using this method as a way of prioritization. We're using this method as a way of identifying where is the greatest opportunity in the entire network of products that we have. Now, if we look at, let's say, identifying occupancy, that might actually be distracting. We might actually look at occupancy for a very low value property and spend a lot of our time servicing low value, low whatever, because their occupancy and their fill rate isn't very good. But if we look at, let's say, what the expectation of fill should be for revenue and see where that fill is the least from what we expect, then we can be sure that all our attention goes very much to the front. It goes first to the properties that have the biggest gap in, revenue potential, and then later on to other properties that have less revenue potential. So yes, if there is a way that we can understand revenue fill rate, which I guess is the weekly sales.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, weekly sales for the room night for the date, and then how much revenue we have on that date, right? Versus how much we expect. Then it's honestly taking the monthly projection and putting it on a daily projection. So now instead of having a monthly projection of starting revenue and like what's the weekly fill rate, now we have a daily projection for each single day, and we can see how much of that are we actually able to successfully convert into sales. So yeah, that would be it. Okay, here's the evolution now. The final evolution, I think. Well, we've already evolved twice on this, right? The final evolution, I believe, is something like a cross product. It's a cross product between maybe the revenue fill rate. This is the relative revenue fill rate multiplied by the occupancy, or maybe the projection or the percentage of fulfilled projection. Okay, that's a little bit weird, but let me divide this into two. So this is for the revenue fill rate. I don't have a good explanation for that one yet, but let's say it was the occupancy fill rate, right? The occupancy fill rate should be the fill rate relative multiplied against the occupancy. Okay. The first cross product, I'm not sure, so I'm just going to strike that through. That's just an idea. I haven't really formulated it out yet, so I'll just say I don't really know. But the second one, does that make sense? So we take a look at the relative fill rate. We look at the entire fill rate of the company, and then we determine what is the median good. So like imagine heat mapping that. Let's say if we're able to fill at 100 room nights a day, that's a score of 100. If we fill at 5, that's a score of 0. So then we give a relative score to any sort of fill rate in between 5 to 100, right? So that gives you a relative value there. And then let's look at the occupancy. Maybe the occupancy at most is 60%, and then at worst is 0. So then once again, we score that on a relative from 0 to 100. We create a cross product between those, and then that gives us a value of urgency. So if the cross product is good, high occupancy, high fill rate, no changes needed, or perhaps raise the price. But if the cross product is terrible, right? Like let's say low occupancy, low fill rate, then we should address that urgently. Okay, now once again, the evolution of that is to revenue. So if the revenue, let's say the daily sales for that particular date is high, and then the accomplishment on that particular date is high, like it's already sold quite a lot of dates, then that is a date that we should probably think of raising the price. If it's the reverse, the daily sales is really low and the accomplishment on that date is really low, then that is a date that we need to actually manage and drive more sales by lowering the price. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, over to the,
Mm.
or let's over to Liz for questions.
Can you like do you have any visualization for this, sir? I
I
mean,
know, I know. This one is
yeah.
okay. Let me give some examples of this so that we can let's say take a few looks, right? So I'll create another table, and I will create a let's say a fill condition, and I'll create a occupancy, and then let's say a suggestion, and then a wait, excuse me here. Let's say a product, right? Okay, let's say we have a fill condition. We're going to use the number
Okay.
of room nights sold per day. So oh wait, let's also add a column here. Let's say what particular date we're looking at. So let's say we're looking at the date of March 1st. And this is across every single thing at Bukit Vista. So on March 1st, in 1 week, we sold 100 room nights per week. So let's say that's whatever it is, right? The occupancy was at 50%. So then we have to create some sort of product here, but we don't know what that product is until we scan across the rest of the data. Let's take a look at another date. So let's say we're looking at March 15th, and the fill condition is maybe 50 room nights a week, and the occupancy is 0%. Okay, so then now we have essentially a sort of a relative value, right? Given the current status, we have a relative fill condition, and given this status, we have a relative occupancy. So let's say this is 100, so it's at the high end of the spectrum, so this is 100. The relative occupancy, it's at the high end of the spectrum, so this is 100. So then the product is, let's say it's 10,000, right? So this is currently at the low end of the spectrum, so this is like 0. The occupancy is also at the low end of the spectrum, so that's also 0, so the product is 0. But let's say we have more data now. Let's say we have April 1st, and we have something that's like 75. April 1st is selling at rep 75 per week, and the occupancy is maybe like, oh, I don't know, it's 25%. So now we have kind of a change, right? So now we have a 0, we have kind of this. So this would probably be like 50, right? So it's somewhere between 0 and 100. And this is also 50. It's somewhere between 0 and 100. So then our cross product would be 2,500, right? Okay, so then we should have a suggestion on this one. If we have, let's say, this condition, our suggestion should be raise the prices, right? This would be lower the prices, okay? And this would then be hold, right? Maybe hold pricing, okay? Okay, let's say we keep on going. Let's say we have August 1st, and then we have, I don't know, something like 150 room nights a week, and we have an occupancy of 75%. Now, okay, now our whole entire matrix changes, right? This now becomes a fill condition of 100, and oh, let's see, oh, this is difficult. The relative condition is the high minus the low. Wait, let's see if I can do this. All right, so what is it? So it should be the thing divided by the high. Oh, I don't know even how to do this. Uh, my math fails me right now. So 150 is now the 100. So the 100 can't be the 100 anymore. 50 is still the 0. So let me think. What is that? That's 150 minus 50. So that's a span of 100. 50 is in the middle. I don't know what that is actually. Can somebody help me with this? What would the relative new conditions be if we have these new sets of numbers? Let's go to. Oh, I'm going to have to rely on you guys. Let's go to Vidi. Vidi, what would the relative one be? This is 100 now, right?
Yes.
This is 0
All
now.
right.
This is
Yeah.
50 because it's in the middle, and this is probably 75, right? Because it's in the middle after that.
Is it in the middle though? 50 plus 25 is 75. But then to go to 150, it's more than 25, isn't it?
Oh, right. So it's something else, right?
So it's basically 75 minus 50 divided by it's you get 25
Okay.
and then right by max minus min, max minus min is 100. Yeah, it's 25.
It's 25.
Yes.
Might be
Oh
25.
no, for 75. For 75.
Okay, all right, 75. Okay,
No,
great.
no, for the 75 RM per week you have 75. Is it?
Okay,
Scaling it into the 200 maybe,
Yes,
sir.
sir, because I think it's 25, 100, 50 and 25. Because 100 is in between 50 and 150, right?
yes.
So it's 0.5, isn't it?
Oh,
The
it's
relative
50. Yeah, it's 50. Okay, this is 0.
0,
This is
25,
25. This is 25
and 100.
and 100. Oh, okay.
100.
All right. Hey, okay, be good. Have a good one. See ya. 100. Okay. This. Oh, yeah. Okay, I get it. Because we're starting from 50. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, it's normalization, right?
Okay. Yeah. Very good. Very good. Okay, and this one now becomes the same. Or no, wait. The 75 becomes 100, right? Because it's the highest the one now. The 0 is still 0. And then I'm not sure. This is probably 33%. And this, I think, is 66%, right? Something like that, no? Right? So this is one third the distance between, yeah, 25 is one third the distance now between 0 and 75. 50 is another two thirds the distance. Okay, so that part I'm confident is right. Okay, so now you have new products now. Now you have essentially, oh, okay, now you have 50 times 66, so that's 3.3. And then you have, this is still 0. And then this is 25 times 33. That's 825. And then this is now the new 10,000. Right. So, and then this is essentially, okay, maybe this is exciting actually for Vidi, right? Because this is essentially machine learning, no? This is essentially, as we accumulate more data, we're able to shift the relative numbers more, and we're able to determine what is the correct cross product for each condition. And then what makes this really beautiful and elegant, Lilith, is that we don't need to actually look at the visualization anymore. Because if we have this, then we don't need a human to look at the map. We already have this, and we've created an if-then statement. If this is the condition, then this is the solution. If this is the condition, then this is the solution. And if we can have thousands of these if-then rules, then we have a system. We have developed essentially a system to define every type of fill and starting condition that then adjusts and corrects the revenue for everything, which is, I think, the end game for how this can be managed. Vinny, you were remarking quite a while back, how are we able to get, let's say, such accurate revenue predictions based on what we were doing for the overall company? It was strange, right? But I think we can actually do it if we use this. So what we're doing is essentially we're measuring how much we're starting, how much we're projecting, and how to get there to what we project in the most reasonable way. So it is a matter of understanding how much time we have to sell. It's a matter of understanding what is a likely weekly sale pace or a daily sale pace, and then identifying which areas need the most attention in order to create the the best end results, right? So that we have the highest amount of occupancy and the highest amount of fill for that occupancy across each container. So what I see it is, you can imagine millions of cups, right? Sort of like with, or maybe thousands of cups, each with different amounts of rainwater, and we're trying to get it so that the rainwater is diverted so that each cup gets to full, but without overflowing. And then we've actually collected the most amount of, uh, of water. And that's the kind of the visual analogy to that. Okay, what do you guys think of this idea? Okay, David first.
Right. Yeah. I think it's a good idea. Like, but somehow, somewhat, I think the result of the prediction or the machine or the system, it will lead to an equilibrium, unless there is an um, exceptionally high data that will change the maximum value.
Mm-hmm.
And if a new minimum value happens, it will pull down all the values of the weights, basically.
Right. So we have essentially.
So yeah,
Okay, I get it. I get it. Yeah.
so the graph will not be like this, but it will try to maintain equilibrium.
Interesting. Okay, why do you think that would happen, Vinny?
Yeah, because of the pulling of the, because it's relative, right? It's trying to pull, unless there is a random unexceptional data that pulls the relative value upward, the equilibrium will
It
be.
will lean towards normalizing itself over time. Okay, all right, got it. And then we have to then ask ourselves, is that normal, something that's just normal as a result of the system, or is it normal as a result of our inputs into the system? So let's say, for example, maybe the system has, every system I think has reverberations, right? Based on what, let's say, the steady state is. So that, it's kind of like Newton's first law, right? Whatever's in motion stays in motion, whatever's, at rest stays at rest. So we need to really know, what is it? Like, let's say we're able to move that equilibrium. Is it because we are depressing prices and we're able to, let's say, move the equilibrium to a different rate, a different occupancy, and a different fill? Or is it just based on a intrinsic property of the Airbnb algorithm keeps it like, within a certain occupancy? We discovered that there was, through the gap night analysis. We noticed that if you don't actually take special measures to sell gap nights, it will never sell it because that is kind of an equilibrium binding, right? As you sell more of the nights, the availability shrinks. So then your fill rate naturally sort of tends to decrease exponentially as your availability decreases too. So that's something that's to do with the kind of like the physics of how calendars work. But if we can actually discover those equilibriums, that would be okay. That would still be a insight and a finding, so that we know what the expectation should be, right? But what are you suggesting, that essentially no matter what we do, it will always even out at some point?
Yeah, like if I simulate data that um, infinitely goes up and down randomly, basically it scatters up and down
Yeah.
because you you lower the price and it goes up, right?
All right.
If you raise the price, it goes down. Therefore, the normalization process, basically, the data will stay relatively unchanged to each other.
Do you think it'll be relatively unchanged, or can we expect a higher median value? Like it will
Uh,
reverberate around a higher,
th-
let's say, overall.
that's it's difficult to say because first, the formula somehow it will kind of work, but because we do not have a constant, or because we do not have a multiplier, constant bias, or a value that we can multiply the variables with, we cannot really project the graph. But the intuition itself, uh, if the constants and the coefficients are unset, I think it will stay in equilibrium because of the nature of normalization itself.
Okay,
It tends to stick to 0 to 1.
okay, got it. Interesting insight, video. Okay, what do you think, Lilith? Do you agree with the video, or would you have any new insight onto this behavior?
Uh, Actually, I haven't working on machine learning before, but uh, I quite agree with what Didi says. And at first, I thought this method is firstly is our tools to fasten our observation to give suggestion or action to the revenue management, but we still do traditional way where we still need people to adjust the price, because there are the other factors, external factors, for example, like the community and the property owner and anything else. So I think that if we can found this method is, first we have to steps by steps, I think.
Mhm.
We use it as our helping tools first to identify, and then the along the way, we hope that we can find the more efficient way to make it more automative rather than using human to evaluate. For example, using the data that in the above table for the example of the cases, then the suggestion will be rise the price, and then we still need people to look at the condition, the real condition, with how many that we should rise or lower. Maybe that's my thought right now.
Yes, very much so. I would agree, Lilith. So as we sort of try to gain more automation, I think the part that we can automate is the revenue risk detection. So because there's so many dates to look at, there's so much of the calendar to observe. I think that detection should be as automated as possible, so that that shows up as maybe a list of notifications as, hey, look, this one is urgent, we should probably do something about this date, this one is urgent, and create maybe even a prioritized list showing which one is the most urgent for every revenue manager to do. So that would be great. That would kind of like be a hybrid system. Over time, what I imagine revenue management, data science, data analysts to do is just to experiment with different prescriptions. In this particular case, when it's this code, apply this method. When it's this code, apply this method. When it's this code, apply this method. And then track the efficiency and effectiveness of each method to understand if those are the correct methods. And over time, I'm sure those will start converging. Certain methods will produce, let's say, more favorable results. So then essentially, I guess you just keep on adding columns here, right? And then what is the suggestion and what is the result, right? And whatever result it is, then the data scientist will then go back and revise the suggestion accordingly. The human scientist, the human data analyst will then look and then think of a new way. So I think yes, very much so. This front end we should try and automate as quickly as possible, and I think that's something we can do pretty soon. It's actually Bayou's question to you guys actually, and I'll let you think about that. What would be that cross product value that we're looking for? So what would that number be, and how do we derive that number to indicate what signal? I think this is pretty accurate in terms of understanding where the biggest revenue risk is at the moment. If we see something like the March 15th, that is clearly the date we need to spend the most time focusing on. And this date is clearly the most successful date. So maybe it's a date we can really think about raising the prices. So this methodology seems to be correct. But anyhow, that's where we are today, actually. So I need to break off for the persuasion negotiation class. If you guys want to join, that's good too. But anyhow, let's go over this. Let's go to Lilith. How informative was this session for you? Was this a good evolution of the previous discussion, or how do we go on this one? Oh, Lilith, you're muted.
Actually, I still wondering about the field condition. It's maybe it's, for example, 75 room night per week. So we detecting it by, for example, today we want to check the fill rate of tomorrow. So is it based on how many room that are filled
Uh,
from the previous days?
Imagine it like this, Lewis. Imagine it like it's a container, like a long container, so it's a column, right? And the fill rate is how many of those cells are you filling per week? So it's a condition of dissecting the booking pace. the booking pace tells you when you got a booking, but the fill rate tells you how many dots on that column are being filled over what span of time. So let's say, for example, the booking pace is 100, and let's make it easy. The booking pace is 100, and all the bookings are for tomorrow and the next day, right? So then in that case, let's say the fill rate is 100 room nights per week for tomorrow. But most of the time, booking pace is not that simple, right? If you get 100, maybe 25 room nights are filling for tomorrow. Maybe the other 75 are filling for dates in the future. So booking pace is kind of like Vidi said, it's like thinking about how many bookings I'm doing today, but it does not take into account how many room nights I'm selling for the targeted date. And at the end of the day, when we make a decision on giving a discount or changing the date, it's on the date of actually check-in. It's not on the date of booking. So as much as possible, we need to look at that column and just visualize how quickly are the dots, or how quickly are the cells in that column being filled. So that's all it is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's basically when someone book it today for the next week, for 3 days in that next week's, they book 4 rooms. So it will be like, for example, they have 7 rooms. They have 10 rooms for 1 week, and then people book it 4 rooms on this week. Though the next week fill rate will be 4 per 10. Is that
Depends on the date. Depends on the date. So
yeah.
let's say this. Here, I'll give you kind of like a visualization again on what it would look like. Let's say the fill rate. Let's go booking pace, and then fill rate, right? Okay, so what we'll do is this. We'll do this live so that it really comes together. So let's go ahead and take a look at our booking pace today, and this is just for squad 4, right? So this is for squad 4, and I'm only going to count the day of check-in. I know most bookings are for more than one day, but let's just say this is all it is, right? So the booking pace from today, the fill rate, let's say for May 14th, is 1. So I'm counting that as a bounty. So the booking pace is from February 15th. Okay, and the fill rate from May 14th is 1. The fill rate for June 1st is 1. Okay, and the fill rate for February 15th, the same day, is 1. And then the fill rate for the next one, February 16th, is 1. And then the fill rate for February 15th is another 1. So then this is another tally. This is 2 now. And then the fill rate for the next one is the 3 now. Third one is also there. The fill rate for the next one is February 19th, and that's 1. Okay. And then the fill rate from February 19th is February 16th is another 1. Does that make sense what I'm doing here, Lilis? So essentially, if you look at, let's say, today's fill rate for a certain property, you can say, I didn't finish this, but let's say the February 15th fill rate for February 15th is 3, right? But then over a week span, you can just count how many times that particular day shows up. Does that make sense? So let's say tomorrow, let's just say February 16th, you get 3 bookings, 1 for February 19th, and then maybe 4 for May 14th. Now the weekly fill rate is 5 for May 14th, and then 2 for February 19th, right? And let's say the next day, February 17th, you get, I don't know, 4 bookings, 4 room nights reserved, and then this one, you get 16 room nights reserved. So then now your fill rate for May 14th is 1 plus 4 plus, so it's 21. So you're filling at 21 room nights per 3 days, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, yeah.
so then we can essentially target the specific date. And oh yes, okay, thank you, Vidhi. We can target the specific day and know how quickly that date is actually being filled, and then know what the occupancy is, and then count how urgent that is. Because ultimately, I think that is the final and most accurate test of urgency, which is essentially how much fill is happening in that particular day. Okay.
Okay, sir. I think I will figure it out. I mean, I will observe it, and then I
Okay.
will find out something.
Great. This is just a back of mind thing to think about. I think in the meantime, while we while we do our patrol, so it's like as we're developing process involvement, we're also developing process competency and also hopefully process excellence if we can create a tool like that. And the final output on this vision is a type of score. It would be essentially what is a score and what does that score mean we should do? That would be perfect. So this score means we should do this. This score means we should do that, and then we can automate the essential revenue management process. And then we just create actions based on each score, and then we just discover more actions and what actions would be more useful for each corresponding score. And of course, then we need to integrate that into how we work with the owners and get them to actually appreciate that. But I do believe if you want to persuade an owner, you can just let it run on autopilot and say, I've run this on autopilot for 30 days, and this is the revenue you're getting. And I can take and let this stop running, and you can see what the revenue you take. And then you decide whether you want this turned on or turned off. But if the results are consistent and they're valuable, no owner will say turn it off, right? They'll say, please keep it turned on. I like it. So then that would be amazing. All right, Lilith, have a good Galawan, and thank you. You have an excellent connection over there. You must be really
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I use Excel, so it's quite good.
You have a fiber connection in your house, or how did you get this?
I'm using my own tethering from Excel connection.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Do you have a company phone yet?
Not yet.
Okay, you should get a company phone. I think we have a few stacked over here, and then we'll cover your data. This will chew up a lot of your bandwidth. But thank you very much for coming in, and we'll see you soon. Yeah, we'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, I will join your persuasion class, sir.
Oh, you will? Okay, all right, great.